Now, Jessica, of course, Putin is also a great fan of Donald Trump. And we've seen recently, of course, Donald Trump claiming, to play this huge role in bringing about the discussions between North and South Korea. In Russia, how is the Putin administration playing what is happening in South Korea?
Well, I think Russia definitely wants to be part of the negotiating. They're very keen to continue with the six-party talks and bringing peace and stability to the Korean Peninsula. I think they have publicly said they very much support the relationship between Trump and Kim Jong-un and the summit. They were very supportive of it throughout. But I think behind the scenes, they're probably feeling that they don't want to be left out of this. They want to continue to have a place at the table. And of course, North Korea presents some sort of lucrative economic prospects for Russia, and they want to see the denuclearization of that area as soon as possible so that they can start building again, perhaps even warmer relationships with leaders of both the Koreas and start trading and be part of the efforts to bring peace to the region.
All right, Jessica, thank you very much for joining us there from Russia and bringing us both the politics of what is going on, but also, of course, the biggest spectacle on the continent, or rather the globe, the soccer World Cup, which segues nicely, of course, into the issues that we're discussing here at home. Shannon Ibrahim, you've written about the peace accord, and of course, the world's media has, of course, put a lot of attention on Trump and, of course, also on the North Korean leader. But you have, in fact, indicated that it is the South Korean leader, Mr. Moon, that is actually the hero in this drama.
Thank you, Karima. Very much so. I believe that the real hero in this whole last week and in the previous months has been President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. He has had a vision from the time he was chief of staff for the previous progressive government many years ago. He was involved in the summit between North and South Korea. He's wanted to have reunification of the Koreas, and he campaigned on the fact that he would bring the peninsula together. And I think it's quite amazing. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had the Winter Olympics, which were called the Peace Olympics. He sent many missions to have exploratory talks with North Korea. And then, of course, him crossing the Rubicon and the DMZ, where you saw him shake. It was the first time a South Korean leader stepped into North Korea in 65 years. And then at a moment where the rhetoric was ratcheted up between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, you saw Moon Jae-in stepping in with his quiet diplomacy and ensuring that this summit was going to take place, because he knows without a peace agreement between the U.S. and North Korea, there will be no resolution to this conflict.
Peter, chip in here. You've been in Greece recently. You've looked at how the international community's been covering this issue. Your impressions? Well,
I can tell you now that America's allies in the West are freaking out. Just before he went to Singapore to the summit, there was a G7 summit which he walked away from, calling the Canadian Prime Minister, and Canadian Prime Ministers are not threatening people generally, weak and dishonest, and then went to meet with President Kim, who we know has run slave camps in his country and kills his own citizens, and to call him an honest man. So the world order that America has overseen for the past 70 years since the Second World War is rapidly falling apart, and what Donald Trump is saying, particularly on trade, to his allies is, I'm not interested in you as allies. I'm looking for partners around the world. And if you want to sell cars in my country, make them in my country. Otherwise, I'm going to put import duties on because you're taking away American jobs. And that directly threatens car companies making vehicles in South Africa.
Now, this is not new for Republicans. They've always had a protectionist approach to the economy. But Donald Trump, of course, is not a traditional Republican, Shannon.
Not at all. And I think that despite the fact that he is making more and more enemies within the traditional Western alliance, and we see schisms within the UN Security Council, I think that on North Korea, at least, we have to give him kudos for the fact that he campaigned that it's too expensive to have US troops in South Korea. It's costing the Americans $1.3 billion a year. And, if he can actually ensure that US withdraws from South Korea and that there is a denuclearization situation on the peninsula, it might be the only thing that he can really point to as a success story in his upcoming election campaign.
But wouldn't that be ironic, Peter? Because the American people won't interpret it like that.
They
surely.
won't, and I don't think other people will. And the people who won't are going to be the Japanese, who will sit there thinking, well, if the nuclear umbrella, the American nuclear umbrella, is now off the table,
right,
what do we do? Do we now start developing our military, growing our military? Do we develop a nuclear capacity? Does South Korea develop a nuclear capacity? Because America's looked after all of these plans, and Trump has a legitimate, and the Americans have a legitimate complaint about Europe and countries that its friends in East Asia, is that the Americans spend much more money defending them or providing them with cover than they do in their own turn. And what Trump is saying is pay your part in all of this.
It's interesting because, I mean, Shannon, the whole success of Trump was, of course, playing on the sentiments of working class white Americans. And, of course, the argument is that, the American economy has been outsourced to everybody else. I mean, that's the rationale. Withdrawing American troops from, South Korea is going to be massive. Do you think it's really going to happen?
I personally think my own gauging of the situation is that Trump has already promised that he's going to withdraw American troops from South Korea. I think that has made the Japanese quite nervous, because why was it so easy for Japan to become the third biggest economy in the world? Because they weren't paying for their defense. And I do think that at the end of the day you will see this, because both Kim Jong-un and Trump need this basically triumph in terms of their domestic popularity.
Okay, so if one says, and this is my final question on international politics, because there's a lot going on here in South Africa as well. Do you think this will cost Trump the presidency, or do you think this seals him for a second term, Peter?
No, look, it's a difficult question to answer, partly because I want the answer to be, he's going to die, But
and you don't want him to be the one who have brought these two countries together.
No, it's all wrong. But the fact is, you have to factor in that he might get some things right, no matter how incoherent he might sound sometimes.
Yeah.
If you look at the American economy, it's really pumping.
Yeah.
American unemployment is at its lowest in 40 years. The market is, the dollar's strong, the stock markets there's a real boom going on in America at the moment, and the Democrats are going to have to find somebody really sort of special to knock him off his perch. Of course, he could knock himself off his perch any old time, but what the Democrats are waiting for is for the special counsel, Robert Mueller, to do the job for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the stuff that's happening on the globe. But of course, in South Africa, politics, changes in a minute, and people have to process it really, really quickly. Now, we've got this massive thing going on in, of course, Eskom at the moment. We've got a potential strike. In fact, there is, a very, very tense standoff between workers and management. We saw Mr. Pakamani Hadebe being, treated quite harshly. In fact, bottles and things were thrown at him. And then, of course, there's load shedding. I mean, people are not calling it that. But, I mean, now the other day, I had a personal experience, Peter. It was Eid on Friday.
You were stuck in a lift.
And I was stuck in a lift in 702, by the way, for an hour. But people were really, really worried. And, of course, when the lights do not go on, it's not a good thing for the Ramaphosa presidency.
Well, first of all, it is load shedding. And two, it is a crisis. And if Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't recognize it for what it really is, the biggest challenge of his political life, then he's going to mishandle it. He had a marvelous opportunity this weekend at a gathering in the Drakensberg with former President Kgalema Motlante's foundation, where he made a speech, and it was all about, let's reimagine South Africa, but let's not deal with what's going on in South Africa at the moment. And I thought he missed a really good opportunity to. You just got to draw some lines in the sand, Cyril does. Otherwise, people are going to keep on stepping across them. It's ridiculous.
Shannon, do you think that Cyril is missing the extent to which South Africans are, to use a Cape colloquialism, gutful of the ineptness of government, of the fact that people are just not doing their jobs, and the fact that, of course, the working class are bearing the brunt? I mean, there's VAT, there's the fuel levy, there's the petrol increase. Workers are justified, aren't they?
I absolutely think the workers are justified, and I personally don't think that the workers and the unions should pay this for the sins of the Zuma administration and the fact that Eskom's board was stacked with all the Gupta nominees.
Yeah.
I mean, they left an absolute mess, and that I don't see reflected in many of the media reports, that this is a result of all of the bad governance that we had over the last 10 years. I do think it's interesting, though, that we see that, when Vavi split away from COSATU, that it almost divided the working class. And now you see those unions coming together, picketing together, and they're mainly working along the same agenda.
Actually forging kind of unity back in, on the streets.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the question, of course, of the Sunday Times headline. You were talking about the Guptaization of state institutions, and we know, of course, of Eskom. We have a headline here that says, Molefe, 19 billion Transnet lie. And, of course, the very real report that damns him and that, of course, indicates that he was very, very involved in setting up that arrangement. Peter, should it not be time for people to start being charged? Should we not have some trials going on? Is that not what Cyril Ramaphosa needs right now?
He does need them, but I just what he doesn't need is trials that don't succeed. So,
like as in the case of the asset forfeiture.
Absolutely. So the last thing you need is a failure. And if you're going to nail Brian Molefe, whatever he might have done, according to this firm of lawyers, I think everybody's reaction is going to be, let's just wait for the Zondo Commission to sit. Let's put these people through some real cross-examination. They can't incriminate themselves, but other people can incriminate them. And I'm sure that that's the strategy. Wait for Zondo, which is wrong.
But the thing is, Zondo is a commission of inquiry, Shannon. It's not a criminal process. I mean, it might lead to a criminal process. Shouldn't we actually demand from the Hawks, from the NPA, that people be charged?
I certainly think so, and I think what was quite sad is that people did go to the ANC and were told to come forward, and the information they gave was largely buried. So the Zondo Commission will bring this to light for the rest of the public to be aware of. But yes, there absolutely has to be criminal prosecutions. Otherwise, we see the Guptas living in Dubai, and there doesn't seem to be any accountability for what we've experienced.
Now, the question of a strike at Eskom, Peter, I mean, it's winter. There's a spike in demand. We've seen drivers who are driving in coal lorries being, stopped. And in fact, Eskom has said that it's been dangerous for people to go in. What are the implications for the strike? How does it set the agenda for us going forward for this week?
Well, it would be insane to have a strike. I mean, what Pravin Gordhan has done in the last day or two is put his hand up to say we take off the 0% increase off the table. Let's sit down and talk again. And he has a right, I presume, to expect that there will be no strike while they are talking about. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, Eskom's workers are required to provide a certain level of service in Eskom by law. And, you simply cannot have in South Africa, while the rest of the world is growing and competing for investment, you can't have South Africa where the lights don't come on. Yet again, it's just absolutely crazy.
Now, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. But this idea that if the lights don't go on, that it's the workers' fault, that's not true either, Shannon.
Well, I think the workers have a point where they say that what has happened this week has been Thatcherism at best, because how do you take a unilateral decision of a 0% salary increase with no consultations with the union whatsoever? I mean, have we got to that point?
Right.
And I think, we should all be concerned about the fact that over the last decade, the load shedding has cost about $300 billion rand.
Peter, do you agree?
No, I mean I do, but I think that the workers, the reason that there is a strike and the reason there is load shedding now is that the mechanisms for workers and management to be co-responsible for the company don't exist. They exist in Germany, they exist in Holland.
The social compact is coming undone.
Yeah, well, we need to create a new one, and somebody needs to do something about it smartish.
Well, Cyril Ramaphosa is the person that is constantly speaking about, the social compacting. I'm not of the view that in the current form it's going to be working. It's not working in Nedlac. We saw that with the national minimum wage, where we have a situation where people are in fact going to go on a strike. So in my view, I think the social compact is in desperate need of recalibration, Shannon.
I agree with you. And I think it's important that Praveen Gordhan, as minister, is involving himself in trying to mediate. But at some point, if we look at the risk to our economy and the fact that we've seen a contraction of 2.2% in our economic growth in the first quarter, the president may actually have to get involved in this and show some leadership to prevent, basically the unions engaging in a national shutdown.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so very much. Of course, Shannon and Peter, that was our panel. Up next, the art of making a cocktail. We go to Jersey's hottest spot in the cool stuff.